Welcome to the Magnetic Dog Training Podcast. This is episode 3. I'm your host, Louis Magnicari. Thanks so much for being here. In this episode, I'm going to be talking about relationship and leadership and how I think of it in terms of our dogs. I hope you walk away having new thoughts, thinking about how you could show up as your best self for your dog in a practical and applicable way. Now, before I get into what you can take away from this episode, I do want to say that a lot of what I'm going to talk about, maybe all of what I'm going to talk about, comes from what I have learned from a man named Jocko Willink. If you haven't heard of Jocko Willink, he is a retired Navy SEAL and a leadership expert. He has a podcast and he has numerous books, both for you and if you have kids. They are fantastic, and I highly recommend you read or listen to anything he puts out. I've been listening to him since 2016, and if you have ever interacted with me in any capacity and have walked away thinking this person is half a normal person who kind of knows what he's talking about, a lot of that is from trying to live up to what Jocko talks about. And before we get into the aspects that make up a relationship according to Jocko, I want to bring out his concept of extreme ownership. The concept of extreme ownership means you are responsible for the outcome no matter what. Whether you think it's your fault or not, it is always better to just accept responsibility, because when you accept responsibility, you start to think about what you can change or how you can approach the situation differently rather than blaming someone else. And the someone else in this case is, of course, our dogs. And I think extreme ownership couldn't apply more to the relationship we have with our dogs. If we think of it clearly, if we put emotion a little to the back burner, we realize that we are completely in charge of our dogs. In fact, we are superior to them. And I know that might ruffle your feathers. It's not really the nicest way to say it, but I want to get my point across that our dogs are basically little aliens on this planet who have no idea what's really going on, constantly thinking about what they can get in that moment, never thinking about future consequences, and that is why it is up to us to show up for them and help them live their best life. So everything that goes on with your dog, good, bad, and the ugly in between, it is completely on you. All the things that go right and all the things that go wrong are completely your fault. And if you can take responsibility, all of a sudden you could start to say to yourself, things are going wrong in this situation. I know it is on me. What can I do better? And of course, if you can't come up with the answer, that is when you should reach out to a professional that you trust. So the first concept I wanted to bring out is extreme ownership. Nothing is your dog's fault. Couldn't be more clear. Take responsibility and figure out how to do better. Now, I want to get into the 4 aspects that Jocko says make up a relationship. And those 4 aspects are trust, influence, respect, and care. Trust, influence, respect, and care. I think about those 4 aspects all the time when I'm working and training with dogs. So let's jump right in. So when I think of trusting our dogs, the dogs that are in my care, the dogs that I'm training with, trust to me is directly related to how much I can predict what is going to go on in whatever situation I'm about to bring the dog into. And I'm trying to predict what the dog is going to do, and then to build a relationship, I want to make sure that I know what I'm going to do if the dog does something I don't want them to do. So here's an example. Street snacking, garbage eating. It is a very common problem with the people and their dogs I work with in New York City. Dogs love to eat the garbage off the ground. It's always new garbage. To compound the problem, rats love to take chicken bones out of the garbage, throw them on the ground like some bizarre version of Charlotte's Web. And every time the dogs go for a walk, they are constantly now in this seek mode, looking for the new garbage. And a lot of people don't know what to do. But the first thing you should do if you are dealing with this problem is to understand that you cannot trust your dog, because your dog is just going to do what dogs do, and they're going to look for the garbage to pick up. So if you can't trust your dog in a certain situation and you can already predict what they're going to do, the next thing to focus on is what are you going to do? If you know your dog is going to try to pick up that chicken bone and eat it, what are you going to do? And this is where a lot of people get stuck and either completely avoid the problem or just hope it's going to get better, neither which are true. And I don't need to go into tactics and skills in this episode, but some common solutions to street snacking are teaching your dog to wear a muzzle, which is not my favorite. There's also ways you can use the leash and whatever training collar you're using, such as a prong collar. That's another method, but that is where you should consult a professional. And in general, if you don't know how to solve a problem, stop avoiding it. It's just going to get worse. And instead, talk to people, talk to professionals, and start thinking what you can do. Because then if you know what you're going to do, you're going to be able to start being calmer, being more confident, showing up as the leader in these situations, guiding your dog, and building a better relationship. After trust is influence, and I love what Jocko says about certain aspects of influence, where he talks about that he would rather follow someone else's original plan, even if it's not as good as his plan. And the reasoning behind that is because if somebody makes a plan, they are much more likely to buy into that plan rather than giving them my plan and having them follow it. In general, we want our dogs to make their own plans. But how do we do this since our dogs kind of have no idea what's going on? How do we get our dogs to think that they're making their own decisions? And it really depends on the situation. The example that first comes to mind for me is off-leash. I often like to bring dogs when I'm initially teaching them to be off-leash and be reliable. I'll bring them somewhere where there aren't too many distractions. And I'll put them on a 30-foot line so that if I do need to catch them, I have 30 feet and they can't just run away. And then what I do is I try to drop the leash and I try to kind of move away from them as quietly as I can and find something to hide behind. And then I wait for the dog, who I have some kind of bond with, to remember that I was there and all of a sudden I'm not. And now all of a sudden they're looking for me. And now all of a sudden they want to find me. And all of a sudden they're starting to get just the slightest bit nervous of where is this person? Where is my person? I need to find them. Then all of a sudden I'll either pop out of the tree or they'll find me. We'll play a game. They'll get a treat. All of these fun things. And now I've kind of inceptioned them where now as they're off leash, they're still thinking, hey, I don't want to lose sight of this person because I did not like the way it made me feel. So the influence that I've given the dog, they kind of think they've done it on their own, which I think is the stickiest influence. So there's a lot of different ways you can do influence, but that is the first example that comes to mind. But start thinking about how you can set your dog up to make the right decision and then praise and reward that decision rather than pulling them towards the decision you want to make. Be creative, give it a try. Remember your dog is resilient, so don't worry if it doesn't go as planned. And I'd love to hear what you come up for this exercise. After influence is respect, and respect really goes right back in my mind to you have to respect your dog. This goes back to the extreme ownership. It kind of goes back to the thought of, yes, we are superior to our dogs. Yes, we are the ones who are dictating the situation and we want our dogs to follow. But if you don't respect your dog, if you start getting into the mindset that your dog should follow you because you said so, that is really crappy leadership. It's going to make a really unpleasant relationship, and it doesn't have to be that way. That being said, I am always trying to respect the dog in front of me while also holding the standard. And the example that I think of is often when I work with fearful dogs who do not want to go on walks because they have culture shock of New York City. And I see this dog in front of me putting the brakes on, scared out of its mind. And this is where I am going to respect the dog, and then I have to think carefully, do I want to continue forward, pushing it through the fear, knowing that it will come out more confident on the other side, or is this a day where the dog is simply too overwhelmed and we need to pivot and adapt? So I am absolutely thinking of the dog in front of me, trying to respect their decisions, making sure that I'm not having a because I said so attitude, and then also trying to progress in whatever area I'm working with that dog. And then lastly is care. And we all care for our dogs. Of course we do. As soon as you bring your dog home, you're caring for it. There's the base level of care, which is feeding, water, a warm place for them to sleep, relax, and live in. Your social company, of course, comes into care. But I think in terms of leadership and building the best relationship, we want to think of those parts of care that if they don't get done, nobody's really going to know, because nobody knows how long you take your dog for a walk. Nobody knows how much you play with your dog, and nobody knows how much you train your dog. This is all about integrity and what you're doing when nobody's watching. So just to touch on those three things, in New York City, I'd say 99% of us are walking our dogs because we do not have backyards and there's no option. But if you are listening to this and you live in a place where your dog's only outdoor interaction is a backyard, you need to start taking your dog on walks. It's like if you never left your house. There's a lot to do in your house to occupy your mind, but you got to leave from time to time to really get different fulfillment. So if you're not taking your dog on daily walks, you need to start. Also, if you are taking your dogs on walks, but you are distracted and not paying attention to your dog, and you're kind of just going through the motion, that could be a place where you start to focus in a little bit and see how you can make it a little bit more of a bonding experience on your walks with your dog. Playtime definitely should be something you do with your dog throughout the week. Probably going to do a completely separate podcast on play, but if you're not playing with your dog, I think the simple advice is just find a game that your dog loves to play, be the adult, play, even if it's a little boring for you, and then figure out how you can really immerse yourself in the game so that you're not thinking about when it's going to be over. And then lastly, probably my favorite is training. Of course, we want to train our dogs to do practical things so that they can be the best citizens, they can be polite, we can bring them everywhere, we can give them the most freedom. But there's also the training about where you're not teaching them anything practical. You're just teaching and training them for the sake of fun. I used to board dogs in Colorado, and I could tell you every dog's favorite time of the day was when they got to go in the training room with me and we messed around with tricks or intro to sport work or whatever it was. They just loved learning. They loved hearing the clicker. They loved getting the treats. They loved seeing how excited I got. I knew what I was trying to teach them. We got to progress. It was really fun. It was really sincere. And dogs just love learning. It's just a biological imperative that it is fun to learn if you make it fun. So that's kind of how I think of care in terms of trying to be a leader and trying to build the best relationship. And those are Jocko's 4 aspects of what makes up a relationship, which I think makes it pretty clear when you think about it like that. So the next time you're scrolling around and you see somebody talk about relationship, something with training, relationship centered, relationship based, blah, 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 start to think of those 4 things and how you can do better for your dog in whatever, whether it's trust, influence, respect, or care. I'm sure I'm going to be bringing tons more of Jocko's leadership insights and trainings to future podcasts. That's it for today. You can find me on Magnetic Dog Training on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, YouTube Shorts. You can email me, lewis@magneticdogtraining.com. Feel free to ask any questions. Let me know how you're using these 4 aspects. And I'd love to also just hear how you are building the best relationship with your dog. Thanks again for listening and look forward to seeing you on the next episode.